Welcome back to the Makko AI interactive visual novel series. The goal of this series is to show you how to build an interactive visual novel using Makko AI. By the end of this series, you will know how to create a full game with multiple scenes and branches, custom backgrounds, custom animations, and how to debug common issues along the way. These episodes are meant to show you how AI game development is more of a brick-by-brick approach, overcoming any problems you encounter along the way, rather than telling AI what you want your end goal to be and expect it to do it all at once. In the first episode, we went from a brand new project to setting the foundation for our game with the first scene appearing with no runtime errors. In this episode, we will take the foundation that Makko AI gave us and ensure that all of the buttons and mechanics work, and then implement our own story and choices into the first scene, custom background included. Let's get started. First things first, if you're following along with your own project that you worked on from episode 1, make sure you have it open and the AI chat is visible. Once that is ready, rebuild and play your game to ensure that it still loads in like before. This is important as we want to make sure there aren't any issues that we need to solve before starting to work on the next part of our game. As you can see here, after pressing the skip story button, we have a white background with a placeholder story showing at the bottom of the screen and no choices appearing for the user. What we want to do before implementing our own story and choices is to ensure that the current game structure works as intended. The story should load in correctly, which it does. The skip story button at the top right should skip the story, which it does. We should be able to see choices appear after our story finishes being presented, which they don't right now, and we should be able to go to the next scene via those choices, which we can't test right now. The reason we want to ensure that all of these aspects of our game are working properly before inputting our own story is that we don't want to start building up our house if the foundation isn't fully finished yet. It's much better to ensure that all of the pieces of our game work with the placeholder information first, so that working on scenes down the road is a lot easier and faster to do. Now let's start working on our next prompt that will help us accomplish just that. Like before, we want to use plan mode here since we know the general thing that we want to work on, but we still want Makko to help us think through some of the things before making any changes. Once you have plan mode selected, the prompt that I used here is, now that the starting scene is working, I want to test adding a second scene that the first scene points to. Help me think through what we need to make this happen as fast as possible. Like with all of our prompts, we want to be concise while clearly explaining what we want and what we need help with. Once you type that out, press start planning. As you can see, in order to complete this task, Makko started by researching how the current scene system works. In doing so, it actually found out that our game and placeholder content actually is already configured with multiple scenes. This means that there must be an error preventing us from seeing choices at the end of the first scene that allow us to go to the second or third scene. Makko presents us with a few different options on how to proceed with the task we ask of it, but none of these are what we actually want. We want to tell it exactly what we saw, which is that the first scene doesn't prompt us to go to a second or a third scene. Here, we do so by telling Makko, neither of those are what I want. Right now, the first scene doesn't take me to a second or third scene. Can you check why the first scene isn't prompting us to go to the second or third scene? This will allow Makko to analyze our current game and figure out where things could be going wrong. After analyzing our code flow, Makko tells us that the current logic should work and that the choices should be appearing 2 seconds after the text finishes typing, as we requested in the first episode. In order to be able to pinpoint the issue, it asks us some diagnostic questions it wants us to answer. The first point asks us if the typewriter effect completes, which we check by replaying the game and letting the text finish typing. Once the text completes, we see that the choices do in fact appear after a delay, and that pressing on either choice does in fact take us to a new scene. This is where I go ahead and retry the same steps that we did before by stopping the game, playing it again, and pressing the skip story button as we did at the start. Here we see that if we press the skip story button, the choices do not appear, letting us know that the issue is with the skip story button. Now that we seem to have found the root of the problem, we want to tell Makko exactly that. I just tested the game again and the options do appear, but only if I don't press the skip story button. If I let the story end on its own, then the options do show up and work. There seems to be an issue with the skip story button and not the game itself. Can you diagnose why the options don't appear if a user presses the skip story button? This tells Makko exactly what we found through the troubleshooting that we did, and it allows it to pinpoint the issue it could be. After analyzing the code, Makko tells us that this is a race condition problem. When we click skip story, the activate skip function runs 3 lines of code in order. The first sets the skip mode as true, the second finishes typing the story, and the third is meant to show the choices now. But what actually happens is that step 3 tries to show choices that aren't there yet, so when it runs the function, it comes back empty. In order to fix it, Makko recommended removing the third line in our activate skip function, letting the normal flow work. This all looks good to me, so we tell Makko, yes, create a plan. Once Makko creates the plan, I go ahead and review this plan to ensure that it matches everything that we had discussed in our chat, and once I do, I press approve. Because it's a one task plan, it completes it quickly. Now we can go ahead and test the game again to ensure that the solution worked. After trying the skip story button a few times, we see that the issue is still there, so there's still some work to do. Since we know exactly what the problem is and we know what we want Makko to do now, we can use fast mode instead of plan mode to continue fixing this issue. Fast mode will allow us to tell Makko what we want it to do, and we'll be able to do it without needing our approval of its plan first. In the prompt, I tell Makko, the skip button still breaks the game. Please ensure that when a user presses the skip button, the choices still appear after 2 seconds. After analyzing the relevant files, Makko found the issue and implemented a fix. Based on its analysis, the issue was still occurring in the activate skip function it worked on earlier. The function was still trying to show the choices prematurely, so it ensured that any attempt to show choices before they were ready were removed from our code. To test this new fix, I rebuilt the game and tested the skip story button once again. This time, the problem was fixed and the choices were appearing after pressing the skip story button. Now that the basic game functions are working, we are ready to start changing the placeholder story with our custom one with assets. At this point in the video, if you're following along with your own project, you want to be at a point that your game is in a similar state. All of the basic functions that you want your game to have should be working with that placeholder story that Makko created for you or the one that you gave it. If you ran into any issue that hasn't already been covered here or that you weren't able to fix by going back and forth with Makko, please leave a comment and let us know the issue you're having, and someone from our team will be there to help. In order to start implementing our own story, we want to work with Makko to figure out the best way to start doing so. Like before, we want to use plan mode since we want Makko to brainstorm with us before making any changes, allowing us to work alongside it and approve its plan and approach first. Our prompt here is, now that the base game is working and the choices in story work, I want to start implementing my actual story to this game. Let's start with the first scene and go from there. I want to be able to give you a scene at a time, ensure that it appears and works as intended, and then go on to the next scene. We will be working one scene at a time, so ensure that if you see any information or scenes that don't exist yet, we use placeholder scenes and text until I provide you with the actual information for that next scene. What do I need to give you for the first scene to get started with this? After reviewing our scene structure and understanding how our system works, Makko is able to tell us exactly what it needs to implement our very first scene. All we gotta do now is provide it with the information it's asking for. These details will be different for your story, but as long as you provide the information in the manner and order that Makko asks you for, you should reach a similar end goal. Here you can see that Makko asked for pretty straightforward information about our scene, from title to narrative text and choices we want for our scene. The only thing that it didn't ask me for that I wanted to ensure that it included was a way to tell whether a scene is an end scene or not. This way, once our game reaches an end scene, it will alert the user that they reached an end and that they can play again. I do this at the end of my prompt by telling Makko, additional note, I want to have a isEnding boolean that allows the game to know if this scene is an ending or not. That way, once we get to an end scene, that game can restart. This scene has isEnding set to false. After entering the prompt, Makko has some clarifying questions it needs answers to before it proceeds. It needs more information about what should happen once we reach an end scene, how we want to handle placeholder assets, and what it should do with our scene titles. Like always, answer each point with what you envision. Here I tell Makko that once a user reaches an end scene, they should be prompted with a the end screen that then shows a play again button, allowing the user to restart the game if they wish to. Then, if that placeholder approach that it mentions won't break our game, it should do it. And yes, we want our scene titles to be placed at the top of the screen in a nice fashion that makes the scene look great. With that information, Makko is able to give us an overview of the plan it wants to generate. After reviewing the overview, everything looks good to me, except there isn't a mention about what we're going to do with the placeholder scenes currently in our game. So I asked Makko about them to ensure that these won't break our game as we transition to using our actual story. Here Makko explains that with the new scene that we are implementing, all of the placeholder scenes will be removed from the JSON file so they won't break anything. Our new scene doesn't point to any of the placeholder scenes, and the ones that it does point to will fail gracefully until we add those scenes. Makko then recommends adding an update to the game init file so that our new scene loads in as a starting point. I simply tell it to add it to this plan, and Makko then presents us with a full updated plan for us to review and approve. After approving the plan, Makko now begins implementing our new scene into the game. After completing all the tasks, we can now rebuild our game and test it out. As you can see, the story has now been changed with our custom story, and the choices have been updated to fit this new story. Clicking on any choice fails gracefully, as Makko let us know it would, and pressing the skip story button still presents the choices at the end, as we expect. Now we can move on to adding our custom background to our game. Like the story, I went ahead and generated these backgrounds before recording the series to save some time. But if you haven't used Makko Sprite Studio to build a background before, we have some great tutorials on how to generate them here on this channel. Links to those videos will show up here on the screen and will be down in the description below. Feel free to pause the video here if you need a second to watch those videos or generate your own custom background, but if you have one ready, now we can implement it into our game. To do so, head over to the Asset Manager tab, find your background, and add it to the project. I named mine the same as the title of our first scene, The Journey Begins. Once you do that, head to the Quick Actions tab and select Add a Background. On this screen, select the background that you want to use for the scene. Then tell it when and where to display this background. For us, we want to display it as the background for scene number 1. We don't want to have horizontal tiling as it isn't going to have endless scrolling, so we leave that option off, and then we generate prompt. This generates a prompt for us with all of the information that Makko needs to implement our background and submits it into AI chat. After working through that prompt, Makko lets us know it has implemented our background into our game with a complete asset loading system. After rebuilding our game, we can see that our background isn't appearing as Makko said it should, so we tell it just that. The background is not showing, fix it. Based on this vague prompt though, Makko searched for files it assumed were in my project, and when it didn't find those files, it thought that the assets weren't loading properly and created a fallback system. From the initial prompt work, we know Makko Engine is already loading all of our static assets from the manifest, so we know we don't need a fallback system and we should just wait for the assets to load. We do this by telling Makko, remove the background fallback system and create a way to wait for the Makko Engine to initialize. As Makko worked through that prompt, it let us know that the script was loading everything asynchronously, meaning that it was loading in the assets at the same time it was trying to use them, which led to the fallback blank background. We need Makko Engine to load in first before the assets, so we want the script to load these synchronously in that order. After rebuilding our game, we see that our custom background is now implemented in our game. As I tried to expand the screen to see how the game handles screen resizing, I noticed that a background disappeared. To fix this, I tell Makko when resizing the window, the background and character sprites disappear. Makko analyzes the issue and tells us that changing canvas dimensions clears the content automatically, and once that happens, nothing is called that would redraw the background and sprites again. Its solution is to add properties to store the background and sprites, and add a function that brings back stored assets as the window resizes. Once the prompt is done, you can see that our game now maintains the background and sprites as the window resizes. The final thing we want to do here is remove the character sprites from the scene, as this part of the story doesn't need any characters in it. To do so, I tell Makko, scene ID, scene 1, doesn't have any character sprites and won't need them for this scene. Remove all placeholder character sprites. After the prompt was completed, we see that Makko was able to remove the character sprites from the scene, but at the same time it broke our game. This error, failed to load scene data, cannot read properties of undefined reading image, lets us know that the scene is trying to load data that is no longer there, which makes sense since we just removed the character sprites from its data. To fix it, we simply use Makko's Fix It button. As Makko analyzes this error, it lets us know that the issue is that the scene manager was trying to access the sprite images which don't exist anymore. So to solve it, it will make sprite loading conditional to whether the sprites exist in the first place. And boom, just like that, our first scene is complete. Our custom story and custom background are implemented, and we have laid the foundation for adding all other scenes into our game. If you've been following along, hopefully your first scene is complete and looking good. If you ran into any errors that you weren't able to fix or that we didn't cover in this video, please let us know by leaving a comment down below or joining our Discord at discord.gg/Makko. We're ready to help in any way that we can. In the next episode, we will be adding more scenes into our game and preparing our game for character sprite integrations. If you're ready to, you will find episode 3 here in the same channel. If you found this tutorial useful and want to see more on using Makko AI to build awesome games, be sure to like and subscribe for more awesome content like this.